Welcome, everyone. We're diving deep into the work of a true literary giant, James Baldwin.
Oh, absolutely a giant.
And it's pretty amazing. It's the 100th anniversary of his birth.
Yeah.
And his work, it just feels more urgent and insightful now than ever.
It's interesting. It's amazing how
Yeah.
his writing, just born out of the struggles of the civil rights era, still speaks to us today
Yeah.
about the complexities of race and identity and social justice, things that we gravel with today.
It's like he had this, uncanny ability to look straight through the surface of things
Right.
and kind of expose the raw nerves underneath.
Yeah.
So for those of you out there starting your journey with Baldwin, maybe let's paint a picture of his life, because understanding his biography is key to unlocking the power of his work.
Absolutely. He was born in Harlem in 1924,
Wow.
a time and place where poverty and racial discrimination were the stark realities for most Black Americans.
Yeah.
Imagine growing up in the shadow of the Harlem Renaissance, with all its artistic vibrancy,
Right.
yet facing the harsh realities of segregation and limited opportunities.
And on top of that, he had a difficult relationship
Yes.
with his stepfather, a Baptist preacher.
Yeah, so his stepfather's strict religious upbringing had a profound impact on him. Baldwin even became a teenage preacher himself,
Wow.
but he later rejected organized religion
Yeah.
while still deeply engaging with questions of faith, morality, and the hypocrisy he saw within the church.
That tension between belief and disillusionment,
Yes.
the promise of spiritual solace, but then the harsh realities of injustice, that seems to run through so much of his work.
Absolutely. And for Baldwin, finding solace in literature was a lifeline.
Yeah.
He devoured books,
Mhm.
finding refuge in stories and language.
You can really see those literary influences in his own writing.
Absolutely.
Just the masterful way he uses imagery and metaphor to convey complex emotions, ideas.
And that art became his weapon against the injustices he witnessed. He moved to Greenwich Village,
Okay.
immersing himself in this vibrant artistic community.
So that must have been a huge shift, right?
It was.
From the world of Harlem and the church.
Imagine the intellectual ferment, the clash of ideas and perspectives.
Yeah.
He was surrounded by artists, writers, and thinkers pushing boundaries and challenging conventions.
So it was really a space where he could hone his craft
Yes.
and develop his unique voice. And that voice, from the very beginning, refused to be silenced or categorized.
Yes.
One of the Brazilian articles we have mentions this anecdote where a talk show host asked Baldwin about the difficulties of starting out
Right.
as Black, poor, and homosexual,
Yeah.
almost as if these were insurmountable obstacles, right?
Right. And Baldwin's response is pure gold.
What do you say?
He said, "No, I thought it hit the jackpot."
Wow.
He said, "It was so outrageous you had to find a way to use it."
Wow.
He saw his so-called disadvantages as fuel for his creative fire.
Talk about turning the tables.
Yes.
He took those labels that society tried to use to limit him and turned them into sources of power and inspiration.
He understood that his identity, his Blackness, his queerness, his experiences of poverty
Yeah.
were not burdens to be overcome, but lenses through which he could offer a unique and powerful perspective on the world.
And that perspective shines through in his writing,
Yes.
especially when he tackles complex themes like the American dream, which, he had a particularly insightful and some might say cynical view of.
Well, Baldwin saw the American dream as a carefully constructed myth
Okay.
that often served to mask the brutal realities of racial and economic inequality in America. For him, the idea that anyone could achieve success through hard work alone was a cruel illusion.
Especially for Black Americans.
Yes, especially for Black Americans who face systemic barriers at every turn.
It wasn't just an abstract critique, though.
No,
He had lived that reality.
he had.
He'd seen firsthand how poverty, discrimination, and limited opportunities could, suffocate dreams and crush aspirations.
Exactly. He saw how institutions, from the education system to the criminal justice system,
Wow.
were often rigged against Black Americans, perpetuating cycles of poverty and marginalization.
And yet that American dream narrative persisted,
It did.
placing the blame on individuals rather than acknowledging the systemic problems at play.
Absolutely.
That's like he was saying, don't tell me to pull myself up by my bootstraps when the system has tied my shoelaces together.
Exactly.
He forced America to confront its hypocrisy, to acknowledge the deep-seated racism and inequality that contradicted the rosy picture painted by the American dream.
Absolutely.
And he didn't let white Americans off the hook either.
Yo, he didn't.
He challenged them to examine their complicity in this system,
Yes.
to ask themselves why they needed to believe in the myth of Black inferiority to maintain their own sense of superiority.
He understood that dismantling racism required more than just individual acts of kindness or charity. It demanded a fundamental shift in perspective, a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about power, privilege, and the ways in which those in power benefit from the oppression of others.
So how did this perspective, this refusal to accept easy answers or comforting narratives, how did that translate into his writing career?
It's a great question.
Because it seems like from the very beginning, he was determined to, like, challenge expectations and push boundaries.
Absolutely. His debut novel, Go Tell It on the Mountain, while a critical and commercial success, already hinted at the bold themes and unflinching honesty that would characterize his later work.
But it was his second novel, Giovanni's Room, that really shook things up.
Yes, it did.
To depict a white, gay couple as the central characters in a novel written by a Black author in the 1950s.
Yes.
That was unheard of.
Unheard of.
It was a deliberate act of defiance.
It was.
Refusal to be confined by the expectations of what a Black writer should write about.
He famously declared, "I am a Negro and a writer. I write about what I want to write about."
Wow, what a statement.
He was asserting his right to tell his own stories, to explore themes that resonated with him, even if they made people uncomfortable.
That takes guts, especially back then.
It does.
It was a bold statement that paved the way for other writers to explore themes of sexuality and identity more openly.
And it really solidified his reputation as a writer who refused to be put in a box.
Yeah.
He was a writer of immense talent and courage, willing to challenge norms and conventions in order to tell his truth.
And speaking of truth, that brings us to one of the most potent and unsettling concepts in Baldwin's work.
Okay.
His insistence on facing what cannot be changed.
Yes.
It's a phrase that appears in several of the sources we have. And it feels like a key to understanding his entire worldview.
It is.
That phrase, it encapsulates so much of what makes Baldwin's work so enduring.
Yes.
He believed that true change, true progress, can only begin when we acknowledge the full weight of our history, the painful legacies of injustice and oppression that continue to shape our present. So it's not about accepting the status quo or resigning ourselves to the inevitability of certain things.
No.
It's about confronting those things head on,
Yes.
understanding their roots, and then using that understanding as fuel for change.
Exactly. He saw the act of facing as a necessary step in the process of healing and transformation.
This is where it gets really interesting, because he wasn't just talking about, like, facing historical injustices or societal inequalities. He was also talking about facing the darker aspects of ourselves.
Yes.
The parts of us that are complicit in systems of oppression, even unconsciously.
That's right. He challenged us to look inward,
Yeah.
to examine our own biases and prejudices,
Yeah.
to acknowledge the ways in which we might be perpetuating harm,
Even when we have good intentions, right?
even when we have good intentions.
So for you listening, what makes you uncomfortable? What are the truths you're avoiding, either about yourself or about the world around you?
Those are the questions Baldwin asks us to consider.
He understood that growth and transformation require discomfort,
Absolutely.
requires to grapple with things that are difficult and unsettling.
It's only by confronting these uncomfortable truths that we can begin to dismantle them and build something better in their place.
And in that process of dismantling and rebuilding, Baldwin's own experiences, particularly his return to the U.S. during the height of the Civil Rights Movement,
Yes.
played a pivotal role in shaping his voice and his message.
Absolutely. When he returned to the U.S. in the late 1950s, he was drawn back by the growing civil rights movement. It was a pivotal moment in American history, a moment of reckoning, and Baldwin felt compelled to be a part of it.
His essays, collected in books like Notes of a Native Son and The Fire Next Time, are just as urgent and relevant now as they were then.
They are.
They capture the raw emotion, the righteous anger,
Yes.
and the deep yearning for justice that fueled the movement.
He became a leading voice of his generation, using his words to challenge America to live up to its ideals, to confront the hypocrisy of a nation that claimed to champion freedom and equality while denying those rights to its Black citizens.
It's like his words are like a punch to the gut, but also a call to action.
They
He's
are.
not just pointing out the problems, he's demanding that we do something about them.
And he was incredibly eloquent in making those demands.
Yeah.
He was a master of language, a wordsmith who could dissect complex issues with precision and clarity,
Right.
while also infusing his writing with passion and poetic imagery.
One quote from his 1963 interview on Canadian television really struck me.
Oh, Tony.
He said, and I'm going to quote here, he said, "What white people have to do is try to find out in their own hearts why it was necessary to have a nigger in the first place. Because I'm not a nigger, I'm a man. But if you think I'm a nigger, it means you need it. It's heavy."
That's a powerful example of how Baldwin turns the tables on traditional power dynamics. He's not asking for sympathy or understanding. He's demanding that white people examine their own psychological need for racism.
Right.
For the creation of an other that they can define themselves against.
It's like he's forcing them to confront the ways in which racism benefits them,
Exactly.
even if they don't consciously realize it.
It's a brilliant and unsettling challenge, one that we're still grappling with today.
Yeah.
He's asking us to look beyond individual acts of prejudice
Right.
and examine the deeper systemic roots of racism and how it has been woven into the fabric of American society.
So how do we even begin to unravel something so deeply ingrained? Where do we go from here?
Well, I think Baldwin would say that the first step is to listen.
Yeah.
To really hear the stories and experiences of those who have been marginalized and oppressed.
To engage with their pain, their anger, their hopes, and their dreams.
And to understand that their liberation is intimately connected to our own.
Yeah.
That we can't truly be free until everyone is free.
This is where his work becomes even more relevant today.
It does.
In a time when these conversations about race, identity, and justice are more urgent than ever.
He offers us a framework for understanding these issues, for engaging in difficult dialogues,
Yeah.
for dismantling harmful systems and building a more just and equitable world.
He shows us that the personal is political,
Yes.
that our individual stories are intertwined with larger systems of power and oppression, and that by sharing our stories, by speaking truth to power, we can begin to create change.
But he also reminds us that change is a long and arduous process, one that requires constant vigilance, self-reflection,
Yeah.
and a willingness to confront our own complicity in systems of injustice.
So as we move forward in this deep dive,
Yes.
let's keep those ideas in mind.
Okay.
Let's allow Baldwin's words to challenge us, to provoke us, and to inspire us to take action.
Because his legacy isn't just about remembering his words, it's about living them. It's about continuing the fight for justice and equality, a fight that he so bravely waged throughout his life.
Yeah.
As we delve deeper into Baldwin's work,
Yeah.
what strikes me is how he just, refused to shy away from the messiness of life, the complexities of human relationships.
Yeah, he didn't just tackle, the big societal issues like racism and injustice.
Yeah.
He also explored the intricacies of love and loss and family
Yes.
and sexuality in ways that were, so raw and unflinching and deeply personal.
And he did so while challenging the very norms and expectations surrounding those themes, particularly when it came to Black masculinity and homosexuality.
This is where his later works become particularly interesting.
They do?
Because he really delves into these themes with, a depth and nuance that can be both unsettling and profoundly moving at the same time.
One of the things that stands out to me is how he grappled with the complexities of identity, not just as a Black man in America, but also as a gay man within the Black community.
That's a layer of complexity that often gets overlooked.
It does.
It wasn't just white society that he had to contend with.
Right.
He also faced homophobia and rejection from within his own community.
Absolutely, even within the civil rights movement.
Wow.
A movement fighting for equality and justice, there's often a reluctance to embrace LGBTQ rights.
Imagine the pain of fighting for recognition and acceptance from a society that rejects you, and then facing similar prejudice from those who are supposed to be your allies.
That's right.
It's heartbreaking.
It is.
But it also speaks to Baldwin's courage and integrity.
It does.
He refused to compromise his truth.
Yeah.
Even when it meant alienating those closest to him.
He understood that true liberation required an intersectional approach.
Yeah.
One that recognized the interconnectedness of various forms of oppression and fought for the rights of all marginalized groups.
So how did this intersectionality play out in his later works?
Good question.
Because I know some of his novels, like Another Country, and Tell Me How Long the Train's Been Gone, explore these themes quite explicitly.
They do. Another Country, published in 1962, is a sprawling, multi-layered novel set in 1950s New York.
Huh?
It follows this diverse cast of characters,
Mm-hmm.
black and white, gay and straight,
Yeah.
as they navigate love, loss, betrayal, and the complexities of racial and sexual identity
Wow.
in a society that is deeply divided.
It's a book that, delves into the dark underbelly of the American dream,
Yes?
exposing the ways in which societal pressures and expectations can warp relationships and destroy lives.
And it doesn't shy away from the rawness of human emotion,
Right.
from the intense longing for connection and belonging that drives these characters.
Even as they hurt each other and themselves in the process.
Even as they hurt each other and themselves in the process.
It's a powerful and often disturbing exploration of how race, sexuality, and class intersect to create a web of oppression that can be difficult to escape.
Then you have Tell Me How Long the Train's Been Gone,
Okay.
published in 1968.
All right.
This novel is a semi-autobiographical work that follows the life of Leo Proudhammer,
Okay.
a black actor grappling with fame, identity, and love.
It's interesting how he uses the metaphor of a train journey to represent Leo's life, constantly moving forward, but also carrying the weight of the past.
Yes.
The memories of trauma and injustice that continue to haunt him.
That metaphor is so powerful.
Yeah.
It speaks to the ways in which our personal histories shape who we are,
Mm-hmm.
even as we strive to create a future that is different from our past.
And then, of course, there's If Beale Street Could Talk,
Oh, yes.
published in 1974,
Yeah.
which was later adapted into an Oscar-winning film.
Mm-hmm.
This one feels different from his earlier novels.
It does.
Maybe a bit more hopeful, despite the tragic circumstances at the heart of the story.
I agree it's a love story.
Yeah.
First and foremost, a testament to the enduring power of love in the face of overwhelming adversity.
Yeah, but it's also a sharp critique of the criminal justice system
Absolutely.
and the ways in which it disproportionately targets black and brown people.
The story of Fonny, a young black man wrongly accused of rape, and Tish, the woman who fights tirelessly to prove his innocence, is both heartbreaking and inspiring.
It's a reminder that systemic racism isn't just a historical relic.
Right.
It's an ongoing reality that continues to devastate lives and communities today.
But it's also a celebration of black love, black family, and the
Yes.
resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable hardship.
Absolutely. And then there's Just Above My Head,
Yeah.
published in 1979.
Right.
This novel, which focuses on the life of a gay gospel singer named Arthur Montana, was both praised and criticized
It was.
for its explicit exploration of sexuality within the black community.
It was another bold step for Baldwin, a continuation of his lifelong commitment to challenging norms and pushing boundaries.
And it's a reminder that even within marginalized communities, there are hierarchies of power and privilege that need to be dismantled.
Absolutely.
It's clear that Baldwin's work throughout his career was deeply informed by his experiences as a black man, a gay man, and an American,
It was.
wrestling with the legacy of racism and injustice.
And what's remarkable is how he managed to weave those experiences into narratives that are both deeply personal and universally resonant.
So for those of you listening who are feeling overwhelmed
Yeah.
by the sheer volume and complexity of Baldwin's work, where do you recommend starting?
If you want a powerful and concise introduction to his ideas on race in America, I highly recommend The Fire next time.
That's a classic.
It is.
It includes the iconic essay of the same name, as well as Down at the Cross, a deeply personal and thought-provoking piece about his early experiences with religion and the black church.
For those interested in exploring themes of love, desire, and identity in a beautifully written and intimate setting,
Okay.
I suggest Giovanni's Room. It's a shorter novel, but it packs an emotional punch
Yeah.
and offers a glimpse into the complexities of human relationships.
And for fiction, If Beale Street Could Talk is a great starting point.
It is.
It's a powerful and moving story about love, family, and the devastating impact of racial injustice, told with Baldwin's signature lyricism and emotional depth.
Those are all excellent choices.
Yeah.
And remember, Baldwin's work is meant to be wrestled with,
Yeah.
debated, and discussed.
Don't be afraid to engage with it critically,
Yes.
to challenge his ideas,
Absolutely,
and to
yeah.
form your own interpretations.
That's the beauty of great literature. It sparks conversations, it challenges assumptions,
Yeah.
and invites us to see the world in new and unexpected ways.
And Baldwin's work does all of that and more.
It does.
It's a gift,
It is.
a legacy that continues to inspire and challenge us to be better, to do better, to create a world that is more just, more compassionate, and more loving. One thing that I think keeps coming up as we discuss Baldwin is this idea of love as like a radical force.
I love that.
It's like woven throughout his work,
Yeah.
even when he's tackling like the most difficult subjects.
What's fascinating here is how Baldwin doesn't present love as this, like, simplistic, feel-good emotion, right? He digs into the complexities of it,
Yeah.
the ways it can be both a source of, immense strength,
Mm.
but also profound pain.
We see that play out so vividly in his novels,
We do.
especially in like the relationships between his characters.
Absolutely.
They're often messy and passionate and full of contradictions.
Right, and it's not always romantic love either.
Yeah.
Baldwin explores familial love, the bonds between friends, the love for one's community.
That reminds me of something he said on the Dick Cavett show,
Oh, yeah.
which is one of the sources we have.
Yes.
When asked about the concept of Black power,
Right.
Baldwin kind of pushes back against the fear surrounding it.
Yeah.
He argues that Black power is simply a demand for recognition, like a demand to be seen and heard as equals
Yes.
in a society that has like historically denied that.
Right. He goes even further. He says, no one is concerned about white power wiping out Southeast Asia. No one's concerned about the white power which keeps my children in the ghetto, which does not educate my children except to become furious.
Wow.
Very powerful.
He's highlighting the hypocrisy, the double standard
Yes.
that exists when it comes to discussions of power and liberation.
Absolutely. He's exposing the ways in which the dominant narrative often demonizes Black activism while ignoring the systemic violence and oppression that makes such movements necessary.
So how does love, this radical love that Baldwin speaks of, how does it fit into all of this?
Right.
How can love be a force for change in a world that often feels so divided and hostile?
Well, Baldwin believed that love, in its purest form, is about seeing the humanity in others, even those who are different from us, even those who have wronged us.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing our shared humanity.
Yeah. Our interconnectedness and understanding that our liberation is bound up with the liberation of others.
So it's not about, like, ignoring or minimizing the pain and injustice that exists.
Wow.
It's about confronting those realities with a heart that is open to understanding and empathy and compassion.
Absolutely. He saw love as a catalyst for dismantling the very systems that perpetuate hatred, violence, and oppression.
It's about challenging those systems, yeah, but also about building bridges,
Yes.
forging connections, and creating spaces where, like, healing and reconciliation can take place.
I love that.
That's a powerful vision, but it's also incredibly challenging,
It is.
especially in a world where, like, fear and anger and division just seem to be on the rise.
Baldwin reminds us that love is not a passive emotion.
Mm-hmm.
It's an active choice, a commitment to fighting for justice and equality.
Not just for ourselves, right?
Not just for ourselves, for all those who are marginalized and oppressed.
It's about refusing to give in to, like, cynicism and despair.
About choosing hope and love, even in the face of, like, overwhelming odds.
And that's why, even decades after his death, Baldwin's voice continues to resonate with us.
Yeah.
He offers us a roadmap, a way of seeing the world and ourselves that is both challenging and profoundly hopeful.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into James Baldwin's extraordinary life and work,
Yes.
we invite you to continue exploring his writing,
Yes.
to, let his words challenge you, provoke you, and inspire you to create a world where love truly does triumph over hate.
Beautiful.
Thank you all so much for joining us on this journey.
Yes, thank you.
We hope you've gained a deeper understanding of James Baldwin, his work, and the enduring power of his message.
Until next time, keep thinking, keep questioning, and keep fighting for a better world.
Thank you for listening.